So yesterday we began our unit on writing linear equations, and our situations involved either knowing both pieces of information, the slope and the y-intercept, or at least always being given the y-intercept where one of our ordered pairs had a 0 for our x-coordinate. So today we're going to investigate what to do if we don't have one of our ordered pairs where it is the y-intercept. So our first situation is when we're going to be given a slope and a point. And so the first question is, what information that's missing that's stopping you from having a complete equation? And the thing that we don't know is the y-intercept. We could currently fill the first box with our slope because our slope is 2, but since this point is not a coordinate of 0 for x, that means it's not the y-intercept. And if you think about that on a graph, if you were to graph the point -3, 1, you would go 3 to the left and then 1 up, and so you wouldn't be sitting on the y-axis. But I have my slope, which is my m value, and I've got an ordered pair, which is an x comma y format. And so what this is going to allow me to do is to substitute all my values into the slope-intercept equation, y equals mx plus b, and then solve for b, since I'll only have one unknown value. So if I begin by writing my formula, I can replace y with 1, I can replace m with 2, and I can replace x with -3. The item that I can't replace is b. And so now I'm just going to solve for b, just like I would solve a normal equation. And so to do that, I would do 2 times -3, which is -6, and then I would get -6 away from b by adding it to both sides, which means my b value would be 7. Now this last step is probably the most important, because at this point, many people stop because they have in fact accomplished something. They found the y-intercept. But remember, we're looking for a completed equation, which means I need to fill both my boxes. And so now I have my slope, which is 2, my y-intercept, which is 7, and so this means my completed equation would be y equals 2x plus 7. Try examples 2, 3, and 4 on your own. Follow the same steps as outlined above. Press play when you're ready to check your answers. So on example 2, I replaced y with 3, m with -4, and x with -1. I don't know my plus b. It's important that this part is here as well, because if it's not there, this would just say 3 equals 4, which is not a correct equation. I need to show that I'm solving for something. -4 times -1 is +4, and then to get b by itself, I subtracted it from both sides to get a y-intercept of -1. Again, I want to make sure I write my complete equation of y equals -4x minus 1. On example 3, I replaced y with 3, m with 2, and x with 6, plus b. 2 times 6 was 12, and then I subtracted 12 from both sides to get a y-intercept of 9 for a final equation of y equals -2x plus 9. Or sorry, y equals +2x plus minus 9. On the last example, you'll see that in this one the slope is just the opposite, but the coordinate's the same. You're going to see how important it is to make sure you do this all the way through and not just say, oh, I'm just going to change the sign of my b. It's actually going to have a much different effect. So y was 3, m was -2, and x was 6. -2 times 6 was -12, and when I add 12 to both sides, I get a y-intercept of 15 for a final equation of y equals -2x plus 15. So it's important that you're showing all of your work, so that way we can assess your ability to write a linear equation. For this game, Would You Risk It, we're going to be referring to this graph over here that has a blue line that has a slope of 4/5, and it also passes through the point -3, 1. So the first thing I want you to decide is, if you're going to answer the question, you're always going to answer every question, but would you be willing to risk your answer? And if you get it right, you could earn $1 million, and if you get it wrong, what you're risking is going to jail for a year. So you don't have to risk it every time, but you at least do have to answer, and you could decide not to risk your answer. So the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what is the color of the line? And think about if you would risk it. So hopefully that you said the line was blue, and you risked it, and you just became $1 million richer. The next question I'm going to ask you is if the line is an increasing line or a decreasing line. And think about if you're going to risk your answer. Hopefully you said that the line was an increasing line, it has a positive slope, and maybe you risked it. If you risked it, you have $2 million. If you didn't risk it, you probably are just sitting at $1 million. The next question I'm going to ask you is, what's the slope of the line? If you said 4/5, you're correct. Think about if you risked it or not. The next question I'm going to ask you is, What is an ordered pair in XY format that lies on the line? And think about if you would risk it. Hopefully you said -3, 1, because that's a point right here. And if you risked it, maybe you're up to a few $1,000,000 by now. The next question I'm going to ask you is true or false? Is the y-intercept a negative number? And think about if you're going to risk it. Hopefully you said false. Clearly the y-intercept is up here. It's above the y-axis, so it's going to be a positive number. My last question is, what is the y-intercept of this line? And think about if you would risk it. So here's where it gets a little tricky. A lot of people like to say that this y-intercept is probably 1, 2, 3.5. It might be 3.5, but I don't know for sure. That could be 3.5, could be 3.4, it could be 3.49. There's only one way to know for sure. And the only way to know for sure is to actually do out what we were just doing above. So I can replace y with 1, because that's the y value of my coordinate. I can replace m with 4/5, and then I can replace x with -3, since that's the x value of my known coordinate. To isolate b, I'm going to start by multiplying 4/5 times -3. Maybe I'll do that off to the side since it's a fraction, and I'm going to get -12/5. Then to move -12/5 to the other side, I would add it. And off to the side again, I'm going to add 1 plus 12/5, which means 1 would have a common denominator of 5, which would give me a b value of 17/5. Now you might think that's hard to visualize because we don't normally think in terms of improper fractions. So if I were to change that to a mixed number, I know that 5 can fit into 17 3 times with 2 left over for a b value of 3 2/5. So if I go back to my line, 1, 2, 3 2/5, that certainly seems like a reasonable b. But remember early on we said, oh, maybe it's just 3.5. Well, it actually wasn't 3.5, it was 3 2/5. So it's important, and that's the point of the game. Would you risk it? When you say the y-intercept, you have to be 100% certain that it's the exact coordinate, and sometimes the only way to find that is to replace with the information. So our next situation is just going to build on the previous situation. But here, if I look at example 4, what key piece of information is missing now that we had before? So before, we had the slope. But since we have 2 points, we can use the subtraction fraction to find the slope. So let's go ahead and do that. So I would do m equals, in this case, y2 would be -1 minus 5 over 2 minus -2. I might do keep change opposite in both cases to get -6 over 4, which means that my slope is 3/2. Now I'm going to box this so I can come back and find it easily later. Now just like on the previous one, I'm going to substitute my values into my formula y equals mx plus b so I can solve for b. Here's the difference. I only need to use one of my 2 points, and so it's up to me which ones I'm going to pick. The slope, I only have one option. The slope is 3 over 2. And so I'm going to replace y and x with something. Now, it really doesn't matter which one you pick. If I look at my ordered pairs, I've got a negative and a positive, a negative and a positive. If they were all positive, I might go with that one. So the next thing I would look at is my slope. Since my slope is a fraction that happens to be halves, preferably I'd like this number to be even so they can divide evenly. X is an even number and x is an even number. So I might just pick this point right here, 2, -1. It happens to be slightly smaller numbers. And so that means that y would get replaced with -1, x would get replaced with +2. But if you chose this point, you're going to find that you have the same answer. So I've got -1 equals 3 over 2 times 2 would just be 3, because my 2's would cancel. And then I would subtract 3 from both sides, and -1 minus 3 would be -4 for my b value. And again, remember, we're not stopping right here. We have to make sure we write our completed equation with both our slope and our y-intercept. And so this would give me a final answer of y equals 3 over 2x minus 4. So this has just one more step from the previous situation, in that we have to start by finding the slope, and that when it's time to substitute in, you just have 2 values for x and y that you can pick from. They need to stay together, but you can pick either one depending on what you find to be the best. Pause the video, try examples 5 through 8, press play when you're ready to check your answers. So on example 5, I did the subtraction fraction to find the slope, and I got a slope of 4. I just kind of highlighted things as I went along so I was able to find them easily when I was ready to write my equation. I then chose to use this point 30. One, it didn't have any negative numbers, and I usually like to look for zeros just to see it's an easy number to work with. And be careful, this is not your y-intercept. This would actually be your x-intercept. Remember, we need the x to be 0 for it to be the y-intercept. So I replaced y with 0 and x with 3, and the slope had to be 4. And eventually I found that it had a y-intercept of negative 12 for an equation of y equals 4x minus 12. On example 6, the very first thing you have to do is make your ordered pairs. Remember, x is the number inside the parentheses. Think inside input. So the ordered pairs would be 4, 9, and negative 4, negative 7. If you accidentally inverted your ordered pairs, you're going to find that you have an inverted slope or reciprocal slope. So make sure your ordered pairs are correct, and you'll get a slope of positive 2. I chose the point 49 since everything is positive, and I ended up with a y-intercept of 1 for an equation of y equals 2x plus 1. And I realized after the fact that it was given in function notation, technically my answer should also be in function notation. But if you're getting this, then you're doing all the hard stuff. For example 7, again, you have to start by setting up your ordered pairs, negative 2, 10, and 4, negative 2. You're going to end up with a slope of negative 2 after doing the subtraction fraction. And then I happen to choose this first ordered pair here, but again, it wouldn't matter. You might have chosen this one because it has smaller numbers. Either way, you're going to get a y-intercept of 6 for a final answer of y equals negative 2x plus 6, or in function notation, fx equals negative 2x plus 6. And then for example 8, again, I've got my two ordered pairs. My subtraction fraction gets me a slope of negative 5. I chose the ordered pair 2, 8 since everything is positive, which got me a y-intercept of 18, although you get the same y-intercept even if you use the other ordered pair, for a final answer of fx equals negative 5x plus 18.